Segment 1, Discovery, 1961. Archive Introduction, Classified File 0173/Department, Internal Security, USSR/Status, Restricted. Found within an unmarked storage crate during the 1998 renovation of a decommissioned Ministry of Geology building, Moscow. The contents include several incomplete memoranda, 6 photographs with damaged emulsion, and a partial personnel roster marked City 37. No Soviet administrative record lists such a city. The first photograph is nearly blank, a blurred mass of snow and shadow. But in the upper left corner, beneath a streak of light, there's the outline of a road sign. It reads only 37. City number 37. Beneath it, a smaller metal tag, population, redacted. And thus began what later historians would call the city that never was. 1. The file that shouldn't exist. It started, as so many buried histories do, with a mislabeled box. Archivist Irina Melnikova, employed by the Central Document Restoration Project in 1998, described the moment in a later interview. It looked like any other forgotten ministry crate, dust, rusted hinges, that old paper smell. But inside was different. The paper was unusually thick, almost like Western stock, and every page had been trimmed, as if to remove official seals. When she lifted the first document, fine gray dust fell from the spine. It wasn't dirt. It was ash. Stamped at the top. Soviet Academy of Sciences, Division of Experimental Settlement Design. Date, February 12, 1961. Subject, Relocation of Research Personnel, Directive 468. A brief note below. All assignments under Directive 468 to be administered at Location 37. Coordinates restricted. Communications suspended until completion of Phase 3. No mention of what Phase 3 was. No coordinates. No return address. 2. Context, a time of fear and silence. In 1961, the Soviet Union stood on the brink of triumph and terror. Gagarin had not yet flown, the Cuban crisis still lay ahead. But inside the Siberian interior, beyond the industrial corridors of Novosibirsk and Tomsk, entire cities had begun to disappear from official maps. These were the Zato, closed cities. Most were devoted to atomic work, rocket testing, or metallurgy. But City 37 was different. There is no record of it in Ministry of Medium Machine Building Archives, which oversaw nuclear programs. No mention in Rosgeo, Geological Ministry. Yet hundreds of names appear in payroll lists redirected to unidentified regional subsidiaries. As one later analyst wrote, the money went somewhere. The people did not come back. 3. The official purpose. A surviving project summary, unsigned, dated March 1961. City 37 designated for experimental study of isolated human systems. Interaction between controlled population and artificial environmental variables. Objective, to test long-term adaptation and compliance within restricted parameters. Beneath the paragraph, a cryptic line in pencil. Control through context, not command. In other words, a social experiment disguised as a settlement. 4. The testimony of engineer Yarov. In 1999, a retired civil engineer named Anatoly Yarov, then 82, gave a recorded interview to Izvestia's investigative bureau. He claimed to have worked on an unnamed settlement near the Yenisei River in 1961-62. His voice, thin and shaking, barely carried over the hiss of the old tape recorder. They told us it was a new mining site. But the layout was strange, perfectly symmetrical, for concentric circles of housing, with a central tower that wasn't for communication, but for observation. We built without maps. Trucks came with supplies but no labels. We signed papers we weren't allowed to read. When asked what the tower was used for, Yarov hesitated. There was always a sound coming from it, not loud, but steady. We called it the pulse. He refused further questions. He died a week later. 5. Field Report, July 1961. Recovered from File 0173/page 6. Handwriting analysis suggests a military intelligence officer, possibly Major Pavel Zorin, who disappeared in early 1963. Arrived at settlement. 312 personnel present, all civilian. Town layout geometric, efficient, no signage except for numeric designations. Residents appear subdued but healthy. Daily routines enforced through loudspeaker system. No mail, no newspapers, no visitors. Children few, education centralized. At 2200 hours, a siren sounds. All lights extinguished simultaneously. Below, scrawled in pencil. Not a town. A test. 6. The Central Tower. According to blueprints recovered from an unrelated architectural archive in Novosibirsk, City 37 featured an observation tower 47 meters tall, a slender concrete spire surrounded by 4 residential sectors. Its interior design was never fully documented, but the few surviving sketches show a spiral staircase descending underground, far deeper than the tower's visible height. Markings on the blueprint indicate lower levels labeled only. Phase 2 Control Systems. An annotation, possibly later, reads: Acoustic induction experiments to begin after winter. This aligns disturbingly with Yarov's pulse, the low-frequency hum he described. 7. The People. The personnel list recovered from File 0173 includes 214 names, doctors, engineers, technicians, and their families. Next to each name is a classification code. C1, Scientific. C2, Technical. S1, Subject, Family Member. S2, Observation Group. By 1965, none of these individuals appear in census data or subsequent academic records. Even their birth certificates were retroactively reissued under different cities. In effect, their existence was reassigned. 8. A strange photograph. The second surviving image in the file shows a group of people, perhaps 20, standing in snow before identical wooden houses. Every face is turned toward the camera except one. A woman, far to the right, looks away, toward the tower in the distance. Her face is blurred, not by motion, but by exposure, as if light itself refused to hold her image. Written on the back. Day of arrival, March 4, 1961. Number 17 did not respond to the signal. 9. The beginning of the vanishing. By late 1962, correspondence between regional administrative offices begins to show gaps. Towns listed for resource allocation suddenly drop off distribution lists. When local postmasters requested clarification, they received form responses. Settlement decommissioned, all personnel relocated. Yet fuel shipments continued. In 1963, one train reportedly left Novosibirsk with 40 tons of supplies bound for City 37. It never arrived. Neither did the crew. Internal memo, Ministry of Interior, restricted. Date, October 17, 1963. Investigations into disappearance of convoy number 571 are to cease. Route data was classified under Directive 468. Inquiry closed. Beneath, handwritten. The road doesn't exist anymore. 10. Personal dossier, subject no. 17. Redacted. Name, redacted. Occupation, civilian teacher, assigned to educational section, City 37. Date of transfer, March 1961. Notes, demonstrates resistance to acoustic conditioning. Status, removed from active population, Phase 3 pending. This dossier was found folded into the last page of the box, separate from all others. The paper smells faintly of disinfectant and something else, metallic, like rust or blood. A single line typed at the bottom reads: Observation complete. Removal authorized. 11. The final page of File 0173. The last sheet bears only a fragment of typed text. Phase 4 scheduled for January 1965. Environmental control systems fully functional. Population behavior normalized at 98%. Recommend permanent closure of external access. Then, a single stamp in red. Erase. And nothing else. The lights in the archive flicker. Irina Melnikova, the archivist who first opened the crate, later told a colleague. When I closed that box, the room felt colder. I could hear a faint tone in the ventilation, like a heartbeat. A technician tested the room's noise levels. The recorder picked up a steady low-frequency vibration, 7.2 Hz. The same frequency later found in declassified acoustic conditioning experiments. Segment 2, Context, 1961 to 1962. The purpose of isolation. Archival introduction, internal memorandum/classified, top secret /USSR Academy of Sciences, Commission on Human Environmental Adaptation. Directive 468 does not exist as a numbered order in official ledgers. Its signature page was removed, but its fingerprints remain, in budgets, in requisitions, in vanished train manifests. Cross-referencing these fragments reveals a single doctrine, born in 1960 and approved without debate in January 1961. Controlled environment equals controlled behavior. 1. A new kind of experiment. In the late 1950s, Soviet psychology faced an identity crisis. The old Pavlovian school, reflex conditioning, external stimuli, was losing ground to a younger, more ambitious generation. Men like Dr. Leonid Kurbatov, Professor Anna Vetrova, and Colonel Pyotr Lisovsky, scientists who believed human thought could be modeled, predicted, and directed through total context manipulation. Not through torture. Not through drugs. Through environment. Change the rhythm of daily life, wrote Kurbatov in a 1959 paper. And you change the rhythm of thought. At the time, the Soviet government was seeking more efficient ways to manage isolated settlements, mining colonies, Arctic outposts, military installations. But by 1960, funding began appearing for psychological infrastructure development. Entire communities, designed as laboratories. City 37 was the prototype. 2. Political backdrop, the age of experimental reality. The Soviet 1960s were an age of controlled optimism. Khrushchev promised abundance, science, and progress, yet behind the rhetoric lay paranoia. The West was believed to be experimenting on prisoners and psychiatric patients for psychological warfare. An internal intelligence bulletin, declassified in 1993, notes. Reports from East German sources suggest American field trials in Korea and Germany involving social isolation and mass behavioral reprogramming. To counter this, the USSR authorized its own counter-experiments. They were not conceived as atrocities, not at first. They were utopian control experiments, attempts to engineer ideal citizens through perfect surroundings. City 37's architects saw themselves as social scientists, not jailers. A new world, insulated from chaos, noise, and disobedience. 3. The language of perfection. Official planning documents refer to City 37 not as a settlement, but as a closed adaptive module. Each resident was to experience a perfectly designed life cycle, work, rest, and recreation synchronized to a central time pattern, adjusted weekly by the tower's acoustic signals. The notes describe gradual environmental harmonization. Translation: conditioning by silence and sound. Imagine it. A snowbound town, the air sharp with frost and chemical disinfectant. No radios, no private music, only the rhythmic tone from the tower, a single sustained note at subaudible frequency. By design, it could not be heard, only felt. Residents described it as a pressure behind the eyes, a vibration that made them sleep easily, forget quickly, and obey without resistance. 4. Internal Report, May 1962. Recovered fragment, and signed. Population stable. Incident rate minimal. Subjects display increased social conformity and reduced anxiety. When external media introduced, radio playback from Novosibirsk station, anxiety increased sharply within 48 hours. All outside transmissions discontinued. Below, typed in smaller letters. The silence sustains them. 5. The Psychological Architects. 1. Dr. Leonid Kurbatov, born in 1912. Lead theorist of the Human Environmental Adaptation Program, HEAP. Formerly of the Institute of Physiology, Leningrad. Known for his paper, Feedback Environments in Group Dynamics, 1958. Believed human emotion could be flattened into predictable oscillations. 2. Professor Anna Vetrova, born in 1919. Linguist turned social behaviorist. Her contribution, the Controlled Vocabulary Experiment. Residents of City 37 were to communicate using restricted language patterns, simplified speech designed to reduce ideological conflict. Her motto: if you remove the word for rebellion, you remove rebellion itself. 3. Colonel Pyotr Lisovsky, born in 1907. Military overseer, liaison between the Academy and the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Believed such environments could serve as models for future colonies, possibly even extraterrestrial settlements. He described the project as a rehearsal for humanity. Lisovsky vanished in 1966. His apartment was sealed for sanitation. 6. Theoretical basis, acoustic behavioral induction. According to classified research logs, City 37 Central Tower emitted controlled acoustic frequencies, between 6.8 and 8.2 Hz, designed to influence circadian rhythms and suppress erratic neural activity. These were not experiments in hypnosis, but in ambient influence, reshaping collective emotion through continuous environmental pressure. A declassified margin note reads: no violence required when the air itself instructs obedience. The technology was primitive, vast oscillators powered by diesel engines, but effective. Witnesses described constant headaches, dream suppression, and a sense of losing oneself between days. 7. The human element. In March 1962, a field inspector named Sergei Makarov recorded the following after a brief visit. At first glance, City 37 appears orderly, even pleasant. The snow is cleared, streets aligned like diagrams. But conversation feels rehearsed. Everyone speaks in the same rhythm, short phrases, identical intonation. It is as if they are remembering their own words from a previous day. When he returned to Moscow, Makarov filed a report citing psychological anomalies in isolated population clusters. 3 months later, he was reassigned to Kazakhstan. His follow-up notes were destroyed. 8. Document excerpt, Directive 468, Phase 2 Objectives. Top Secret, 1962. The purpose of environmental modulation is to test the degree of spontaneous deviation among isolated social units. If deviation remains below 2% over 12 months, expansion to larger population models is authorized. Below. Deviation exceeded threshold due to subject number 17. Corrective removal authorized under Phase 3. The same subject 17 whose file was found in Segment 1. 9. Internal debate. Not everyone agreed. In the summer of 1962, minutes from an internal committee meeting reveal growing discomfort among scientists involved. Vitrova, we are transforming citizens into reflections. The data is clean because they have stopped being human. Lisovsky, they are pioneers, the first to live in harmony with their environment. Kurbatov, harmony or obedience. There is no difference if the outcome is peace. Shortly after, Vitrova was transferred back to Moscow for administrative duties. Her name disappears from subsequent correspondence. 10. Field Report, October 1962. Population count, 298. Morale, stable. No reported illness, no violence, no birth since February. Observers note reduced effect in subjects, laughter rare, conversations brief. Weather sensors detect persistent atmospheric vibration near Central Tower, amplitude constant at 7.1 Hz. A footnote, added later by a reviewer in 1970, reads: The data is remarkable, but no one asked what became of the people once the signal stopped. 11. The administrative seal. By late 1962, a new bureaucratic layer had formed around City 37. The project no longer belonged to the Academy, but to an unnamed division of the Ministry of Health. Budgets were rerouted through medical infrastructure categories. This disguised the program as a clinical study, hiding it from foreign intelligence and domestic oversight alike. Yet one letter, found in a private collection in Irkutsk, exposes the unease even inside the ministry itself. Letter from Dr. R. Belov to Deputy Minister, January 1963. Comrade, we have constructed an artificial calm that is more terrifying than chaos. I visited the town in December. The silence was like a physical weight. They smiled, but it was the smile of people who no longer remember why one should smile. The authenticity of this letter remains disputed among historians. 12. The missing coordinates. Maps recovered from the late 1980s reveal an empty zone between Krasnoyarsk and the Yenisei. A single blacked-out rectangle, roughly 20 kilometers wide, labeled only Resource Area 17. Satellite imagery from 1972, declassified after 1991, shows faint geometric outlines beneath snow, for concentric circles. Nothing else. No roads. No signs of habitation. When analysts compared this with railway blueprints from 1961, they noticed something extraordinary. The tracks leading to that area ended abruptly, mid-forest, with no terminal point. As if the city had simply been disconnected from the country that built it. 13. Footnote, the Western intelligence interest. In 1964, British intelligence briefly referenced a Soviet environmental conditioning site in a report to MI6 titled Behavioral Control Hypotheses. A single sentence reads, "Recent Soviet developments in environmental influence suggest an enclosed population experiment in central Siberia, verification impossible." No further mention appears. It was as though the world had glanced at a shadow, then looked away. 14. The silence too perfect. Every government has its silences, but few so complete as City 37's. By 1963, all public references to experimental settlement programs ceased. Scientists were reassigned, facilities dismantled, archives purged. Yet the logic behind the project, the dream of perfect behavioral harmony, did not die. It migrated, quietly, into the rhetoric of urban design, education theory, and mass media studies. A memo from 1964 hints at this transition. Techniques developed in adaptive module experiments to inform future civic planning in remote regions. The shadow of City 37 stretched beyond its fences. They said they wanted peace. They built a world so quiet that even dissent forgot to breathe. City 37 was not destroyed by explosion or rebellion. It faded out, like a tone held too long, dissolving into silence. Segment 3, Dissent, 1962 to 1963. The sound beneath the snow. Archival introduction, transcript, field recording 14A/source, unknown/date, possibly January 1963. Low static. A faint hum, subsonic, steady. A man's voice, distant. You don't hear it at first. You feel it, in your teeth, in the back of your head. The air moves, but the wind is still. They said it's just the generator, but the generator stopped days ago. Audio ends abruptly. No speaker identified. The tape was found inside an unmarked canister labeled Phase 3 Log 1, The Shift. By the winter of 1962, something inside City 37 began to change. The reports grow less precise, the handwriting more erratic. Paper stock changes, cheaper, thinner. Margins fill with strange notes, like nervous ticks. Static in tower. Subjects restless at night. Complaints of ringing in the ears. Frost forming inside homes despite heating. Official explanations cite mechanical fault. Unofficial margins tell another story. Tone fluctuating. Unknown modulation. Dreams recurring. 2. Field report, December 1962. Recovered fragment, page torn and water damaged. At 3:12, tower emitted sequence of 5 pulses, increasing in amplitude. Duration, 47 seconds. Following event, 5 residents emerged from housing units simultaneously, walked toward tower in snow, and remained standing, motionless, for approximately 10 minutes. Afterward, each returned indoors. None remembered leaving their homes. A thin pencil mark runs through the paragraph, ending with one word. Resonance. 3. The Dream Reports. Throughout January 1963, medical records from the settlement's infirmary show a pattern of complaints labeled Disturbance Type B. The symptoms, sleeplessness, shallow breathing, and vivid repetitive dreams. They dream of standing in the square, one nurse wrote. Always the same. Always snowing. They hear the tone and feel they must follow it. The dreams spread. By February, more than half the population reported identical content. And then, silence. From March onward, the infirmary stops recording sleep complaints entirely. Not because they ceased, but because no one came to report them. 4. Personnel dossier, subject no. 17. Redacted. Recovered continuation from file 0173, matching segment 1. Exhibits increasing resistance to auditory conditioning. Maintains recall of prior identity and external events. Refuses to conform to communal routines. Notably, reports hearing another sound beneath the tone, a slower rhythm, described as breathing under the earth. Classified as anomaly. Removal pending authorization. A footnote in a later handwriting. Subject 17 possibly perceives modulation drift, should not be terminated until cause identified. Her name remains redacted, but in later oral accounts from technicians, she appears again, described only as the woman who remembered Moscow. 5. A strange weather pattern. Meteorological data from the region shows a continuous temperature inversion from February to April 1963, meaning warmer air above, colder air trapped below, sealing the valley like a lid. This would have amplified low-frequency sound across the settlement. Residents reported the sky humming, snow vibrating, and dreams that taste like metal. Engineers attempted recalibration. 3 technicians entered the tower to adjust the oscillators. 2 returned. The survivor, Technician S. Levin, gave a brief written statement before being transferred. Inside, everything vibrates. Even the metal stairs move like a living thing. You can't hear the tone clearly, you feel it, like pressure under your ribs. We reached the control room. The dials were turning by themselves. Levin's testimony was dismissed as exhaustion. He was later committed to a psychiatric hospital in Omsk. 6. The failure of control. In March 1963, the project logs shift from confidence to confusion. The experiment that was meant to stabilize behavior now produced erratic cycles, periods of unnatural calm followed by sudden mass agitation. Report excerpt. At 4:50, multiple subjects exited residences and assembled near Central Tower, forming concentric circles without instruction. Duration, 19 minutes. No sound other than wind recorded. Hypothesis, synchronization phase instability. The tone had changed, subtly, then dramatically. Kurbatov's marginal note. We built harmony. It has learned to hum on its own. 7. Interview excerpt, the janitor of City 37. Transcript from oral history recorded 1999, identity verified as former maintenance worker, name withheld at family's request. You could hear it in the pipes. That's what people forget. The sound didn't come only from the tower, it was in the water, in the walls. Sometimes at night, when the wind stopped, you could hear whispering. But it wasn't voices, exactly. It was like the sound was remembering us. When asked how the project ended, he fell silent for over a minute. Then, softly, the tower stopped. The people didn't. 8. The missing scientists. Between April and July 1963, 6 senior researchers assigned to City 37 ceased communication. Their families received letters, all dated the same day, all written in identical phrasing, typewritten, with minor spelling errors inconsistent with the author's prior correspondence. Each letter began, "Dearest, name, we are well. The work continues as planned." Each ended with, "The sound is almost perfect now." All 6 were declared missing in 1965. 9. Field Report, June 1963. Author, Major P. Zorin, previously cited in Segment 1. Visited site following multiple communication failures. Settlement appears operational but unnaturally still. No movement observed for first 30 minutes. Residents emerged only after vehicle engine ceased. They smiled and saluted without instruction. Voices uniform, emotionless. When questioned, all responded. Everything functions as intended. Zorin requested immediate evacuation authorization. The reply came 12 days later. Directive 468 supersedes field authority. Maintain observation only. He disappeared on his next visit. 10. Internal log, Phase 3 status. Top secret/undated, 1963. Behavioral synchronization exceeded optimal parameters. Population demonstrates group self-regulation even during system outage. Hypothesis: prolonged exposure has induced spontaneous feedback loop between environmental frequency and neural patterning. Conclusion: system no longer requires active modulation. The city sustains itself. Below, handwritten. We taught them silence, and the silence learned to teach. 11. The tower goes dark. On October 3, 1963, all transmissions from City 37 ceased. The monitoring station in Novosibirsk recorded one final signal, a short sequence of pulses unlike any previous modulation. Analysts later described it as structured, almost linguistic. Then, absolute silence. When a retrieval team was finally dispatched weeks later, the access road had collapsed under frost. By the time they reached the coordinates, the town was buried in snow. No smoke, no sound, no footprints. Every home was intact, doors unlocked, food still on tables. But no residents were found. Except one. 12. The woman in the square. A single body sat frozen in the center of the town square, upright, eyes open. Female, mid-30s. Clothing consistent with teacher's uniform listed in earlier dossiers. In her lap, a notebook filled with fragments of text, written in alternating Russian and phonetic symbols. Last entry reads. The tone stopped. But now it's inside us. The handwriting trembles, letters dissolving toward the end. At the bottom of the page, a line in faint pencil. Subject number 17. 13. Aftermath, The Quiet Files. The official explanation, issued 1964. City 37 evacuated due to chemical contamination. But no chemical records exist. No medical data, no evacuation manifests, no autopsies. Satellite photography from the 1970s shows the settlement partially collapsed but still visible, the tower leaning, casting an unnatural shadow even at noon. When researchers examined the film decades later, they noted a faint distortion in the image near the tower's base, like interference lines. An analyst at Roscosmos, half-jokingly, wrote, "Perhaps the sound still echoes on film." 14. The echo in the archive. Archivist Irina Melnikova, who discovered file 0173 in 1998, described her final day working on the restoration. I was cataloging the last page when my monitor began to flicker. I thought it was static. But the waveform analyzer showed a pattern repeating every 7 seconds, a pulse at exactly 7.1 Hz. She paused. The same frequency as in the reports. Her supervisor dismissed it as electrical interference. A month later, the restoration wing was closed for renovation. No further catalog entries were made under file 0173. They built a city to test obedience. But obedience, once perfected, needs no master. The signal stopped, yet something continued to listen. Segment 4, Witnesses, 1964 to 1968. The Men Who Tried to Forget. Archival note, file reconstruction status, partial. Source, Ministry of Internal Security, Division of Anomalous Incidents, defunct. Date range, 1964 to 1968. Remaining pages 91 to 112 recovered from classified box S93/37. Contents include interrogation transcripts, transfer records, and one audio log labeled for internal review only. Handwritten on the box in red pencil. Don't listen to the tape. It remembers. 1. The official visit. In March 1964, a commission was formed under Directive 702B to investigate the loss of Settlement 37. The investigation lasted less than 6 weeks. Its conclusion, no evidence of structural sabotage or biological contamination, was classified until 1987. The commission's chair, Colonel Anton D. Koval, filed a 39-page summary. Most of it concerns logistics, fuel consumption, snow depth, equipment calibration. But page 38 breaks pattern. The typewriter font shifts, alignment uneven. We heard something in the valley, Koval wrote. It was not wind. It came from beneath the snow, like breathing, deep and mechanical. We were ordered not to discuss it. I have followed orders my whole life. But this was not human. The page ends mid-sentence. Page 39 is blank. 2. Interrogation transcript, subject, Technician S. Levin. Recovered from Omsk Psychiatric Hospital Archives, 1965. Interviewer, do you remember the tone? Levin, yes. Interviewer, describe it. Levin, it wasn't one sound. It was layers. Like a choir, but without voices. Interviewer, when did it begin? Levin, it never stopped. You just stopped noticing. Interviewer, what do you mean by that? Levin, once you hear it long enough, silence sounds wrong. Pause. Interviewer, you were transferred for exhaustion, correct? Levin, they said I was sick. But I think. Audio cuts, followed by distortion. The remainder is blank tape. Levin was found dead in his cell 6 months later. Autopsy, cardiac failure. No abnormalities noted in brain tissue, except faint scarring in the temporal lobes, consistent with prolonged low-frequency exposure. 3. The returned files. In 1965, a junior archivist named Mikhail Zuev in Novosibirsk reported receiving a sealed envelope with no sender address. Inside were 3 photographs and a handwritten note. You forgot them. But they did not forget you. The photos depict a snow-covered square, no visible bodies. The communications tower, leaning at an angle, surrounded by frozen mist. A woman's face, eyes open, frost in her lashes. The envelope was logged, sealed, and later misplaced. It reappears in inventory records again, in 1974, 1981, 1991. Each time, in a different building. 4. Field Report, Internal Memo, Ministry of Communications, 1966. Recent disturbances in long-range frequency bands between 6.8 to 7.3 Hz have caused operational anomalies in radar systems across the western Siberian district. Several technicians report experiencing auditory hallucinations during calibration procedures. Recommend discontinuing use of low-band resonant generators until further notice. Margin note, added later in blue pen. It's them. The tone is leaking. 5. Testimony, the driver. Oral account recorded in 1972 by journalist V. Murov, suppressed publication. I drove supplies to the site twice, once before it went silent, once after. The first time, people waved. They smiled. The second time, no one came out. I parked near the square, and I swear, I heard music. Not radio, not song. Just harmony. Low, like the world humming to itself. When I stepped out of the truck, I couldn't feel the cold anymore. It felt good. That scared me more than anything. He stopped speaking for a long moment, voice trembling. They told me I was gone for 2 days. But the engine was still warm. 6. The briefing. Declassified KGB internal briefing, 1967, mentions repeated psychogenic phenomena in personnel formerly assigned to restricted sites. Subjects display intrusive recollections of sound patterns, recurring dreams of structured landscapes, and compulsive sketching of concentric circles. Recommend controlled isolation and long-term observation. Memory erasure protocols under evaluation. At the bottom of the page, someone has drawn a perfect circle, by hand, without compass, and written. It never stops. 7. The forgotten burial. Local rumor from the nearby village of Tungusk, recorded 1968. There was a convoy once, came in spring. They said it was cleanup. But they didn't bring back bodies, they buried metal. Big cylinders, like coffins for machines. Later excavations, post-1991, confirmed the existence of buried reinforced canisters beneath permafrost near the coordinates. Contents unknown. All attempts at retrieval halted by spontaneous equipment failure, magnetometers, radios, and even digital cameras malfunction. Local folklore calls the site the Valley That Listens. 8. Classified audio log, the psychologist's interview. Recovered fragment, 1968, speaker IDs redacted. Psychologist, you've been dreaming again. Subject, not dreaming. Remembering. Psychologist, remembering what? Subject, the tone. Psychologist, how can you remember sound that's no longer playing? Subject, because it isn't sound. It's waiting. Brief silence, then faint low-frequency hum detected on tape background. File marked, corrupted. 9. The official closure. In December 1968, Directive S-9337 officially terminated all records relating to the Behavioral Modulation Initiative. All associated personnel were reassigned or discharged. All materials ordered destroyed. An internal note appended by Deputy Director Kurbatov himself. The project succeeded beyond control. The tone will persist until forgotten. Therefore, forget. He died 3 weeks later. F. 10. Personal letter, unsent. Discovered in Kurbatov's apartment drawer, undated. To whoever finds this. We thought obedience was peace. We thought silence meant order. But silence, once taught, begins to listen back. They asked us to erase the records. But you cannot erase sound. You can only make it wait. The letter ends with a fingerprint pressed into the page, no ink, just pressure. 11. Photographic evidence. In 1968, during an aerial survey of the Yenisei Basin, a reconnaissance pilot captured a blurred image of a circular depression in the snow. The photograph was filed as unremarkable geological anomaly. When later examined in high contrast, faint symmetrical patterns became visible, 8 concentric rings radiating outward. An audio technician, reviewing the digital scan decades later, noticed something strange. The file's static noise formed a repeating pattern at 7.1 Hz. 12. The return of memory. By the late 1960s, survivors of City 37 began to reappear, scattered across Siberia and Central Asia. No official record of their relocation exists. But scattered testimonies suggest a shared symptom, temporal drift. One witness, registered in Irkutsk under false identity, told a doctor, "Sometimes the snow falls backward." Another, a schoolteacher in Tomsk, was overheard humming softly during a lesson. When a student asked what song it was, she smiled and said, "It's not a song. It's home." She later disappeared. 13. The last test. In autumn 1968, the ministry authorized one final reconnaissance of the valley, code name Operation Quiet Sunday. Of the 6 men sent, 5 returned. The surviving captain's debriefing, declassified in 1992, includes this exchange. Interviewer: "What did you see in the valley?" Captain: "Nothing moved. But I swear the air was heavy. Like breathing underwater." Interviewer: "Did you locate the tower?" Captain: "We saw its shadow. But not the tower." Interviewer: "The shadow?" Captain: "Yes. It was there without the tower." He resigned from service within the month. 14. Final note, recorded 1968, tape found 1998. Faint static. A slow, rhythmic pulse. A man's voice, weary. "I think it's in the soil now. Every step, every shovel, every breath, it listens. They told us to burn the records. But paper only carries ink. The real record is the silence itself." The tape ends with a single tone. Duration: 47 seconds. Frequency: 7.1 Hz. Segment 5, Exposure, 1969 to 1975. The Frequency War. Archival header, Department of Defense, declassified, 1999. Between 1969 and 1975, both superpowers conducted classified research into the use of low-frequency resonance for psychological influence. These experiments, originally based on recovered Soviet materials, became the foundation of several covert projects within NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Among these was Operation Silent Vector, a direct continuation of the erased Soviet program once known only as Settlement 37. Handwritten marginal note, anonymous. The Americans called it behavioral harmonization. The Soviets called it obedience through tone. Neither side understood what they had revived. 1. The transmission. In February 1969, a U.S. listening post in Turkey intercepted a faint, rhythmic signal emanating from deep within Siberia. The operator described it as, not Morse, not voice, something between. Frequency, 7.1 Hz. Duration, continuous, 3 days. The station chief, believing it to be a Soviet test of new radar systems, forwarded the sample to the National Security Agency. Within weeks, the file reached Project Storax, a joint research cell working on neurological broadcast phenomena. An internal memo, partially declassified 2003, reads: "The pattern bears resemblance to brainwave cycles observed in human REM states. If modulated correctly, such frequency may theoretically influence mood and perception." The memo ends with a handwritten postscript. Source claims original data came from a lost Soviet settlement. Verify. 2. Field Report, CIA Office, Geneva, 1969. Contact from inside USSR confirms persistent rumors of vanished research town. Project rumored to involve psychoacoustic conditioning and atmospheric resonance. Locals refer to site as the city that listens. Request clearance to pursue cross-border contact with potential defectors. Approval granted, April 12, 1969. 3. The defector. June 1970. A Soviet physicist, Dr. Oleg Rudakov, disappears from a conference in Helsinki. He resurfaces 3 weeks later in Zurich, where he turns himself over to U.S. intelligence. His initial interview, declassified 1998, runs over 9 hours. He is pale, shaking, with partial hearing loss. Rudakov, it was called Project Zov, the call. We thought we were studying weather interference. But then we noticed it wasn't the sky that changed. It was us. Interviewer, you mean the tone affected behavior? Rudakov, behavior, yes. But deeper. It synchronized people. Made them quiet. Interviewer, quiet. Rudakov, no arguments, no thoughts. Just the hum. Peaceful. Terrifying. 2 weeks later, Rudakov was found dead in his hotel room. Official cause, suicide. Unofficial, frequency-induced cerebral rupture. 4. Project Silent Vector, United States, 1971. By 1971, the Pentagon had authorized a continuation of Rudakov's findings under the Advanced Acoustics Division. Objective: to determine if sustained subsonic frequency exposure could reduce aggression in combat zones. Early field tests were conducted at Fort Bragg and White Sands. Test groups of soldiers were exposed to controlled low-frequency fields between 6.5 to 7.2 Hz for up to 90 minutes. Results: 67% reported disorientation. 42% experienced mild euphoria. 18% showed temporary compliance to verbal commands even when contradictory. One researcher's note reads, "They stopped blinking. They stood perfectly still, waiting for something we couldn't hear." Funding increased threefold the following year. 5. Parallel Program, USSR, 1972. Meanwhile, Soviet intelligence, having intercepted NATO frequency tests, revived its own version under Directive Snegorod 2. Site: a repurposed mining complex near Norilsk. Lead scientist, Professor Yelena Vorontsova, once an acoustics engineer for the original City 37. Declassified fragment of her 1972 field report. We believed we could reverse the tone, make it protective, curative. Instead, it began to shape the air itself. The walls trembled in rhythm. One of the assistants said she could see sound in the frost. Vorontsova disappeared later that year. Her last recorded statement: "The city is trying to rebuild itself." 6. The American Paranoia. In 1973, reports surfaced within the U.S. intelligence community of cross-continental frequency drift. Certain shortwave bands used by NATO began to show spontaneous self-modulation at precisely 7.1 Hz. The phenomenon coincided with an increase in insomnia, agitation, and auditory hallucinations among operators. A classified NASA report from 1973 warns, uncontrolled low-frequency resonance may trigger synchronized neural activity across large populations. The memo is labeled "for contingency planning only." Its cover sheet bears a single word handwritten in red pencil: war. 7. The tone that traveled. By 1974, both powers had realized the terrifying implication. The tone, whatever its nature, was no longer confined to the Siberian soil. It was traveling through cables, through airwaves, through memory. A declassified KGB intercept from that year records an American broadcast engineer in Munich saying over open frequency, "It's not jamming us. It's listening." 8. The incident at KUGA station, 1974. Field account by engineer R. Henkel, NATO Communications Division. During a midnight calibration, the signal meters started pulsing on their own. Then all 6 radios played the same tone. It wasn't loud, just everywhere. Everyone froze. For a moment, I thought the whole room was breathing. 3 operators were later hospitalized for seizures. All described hearing whispered syllables beneath the hum. Spectral analysis showed nothing, only a perfect, repeating waveform. Henkel resigned 2 days later. He left a single note on his desk. Silence isn't silence anymore. 9. Policy Response, United States, 1975. In an emergency closed-door session, a senior advisor to the National Security Council summarized, "We are facing an acoustic contagion. Not a weapon, not a virus, a frequency. It does not need transmitters. It only needs memory." The memo proposes the creation of behavioral shielding technologies, early prototypes of what would later evolve into signal cancellation networks. Publicly, these were framed as anti-jamming systems. Privately, they were protection against the tone. 10. The missing tapes. In 1975, 5 magnetic reels labeled ZOV, original source, were shipped from Zurich to Washington under diplomatic seal. Upon arrival, the case was empty. Logbooks show it was never opened in transit. A month later, witnesses at a warehouse in Maryland reported a low hum emanating from the wooden crate, now empty, just before all power failed for 3 minutes. No trace of the reels was ever found. 11. Footnote, redacted testimony, date unknown. You can destroy a document, burn a lab, bury a town. But sound just hides in silence, waiting for the next ear. What began as a secret Soviet experiment had crossed oceans, nations, and minds. The Cold War was no longer about borders or ideologies. It had become a war for the human frequency itself. Segment 6, Erasure, 1976 to 1989. The Vanishing. Archival header, Internal Security Committee, USSR, declassified 2001. Directive 9112 mandates the destruction or reclassification of all acoustic research data originating from Settlement 37 and its subsequent derivatives. Objective: prevent cross-contamination of cognitive material and the proliferation of behavioral resonance incidents. Compliance deadline: immediate. Below, stamped 3 times in red. Executed. 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 But the silence left behind was not compliance, it was vacancy. 1. The cleaners. Between 1976 and 1980, an unacknowledged task force operated under the codename Vector Null. Its agents were not soldiers, they were librarians, archivists, bureaucrats. Their mission: to erase. They arrived quietly at ministries, universities, research bases, with boxes of blank paper and magnets for the tapes. A recovered testimony from a regional officer, recorded in 1993. They came at night. No insignia, no orders. Just said, "Show us the documents." Then they burned them in metal barrels behind the building. The smoke smelled like ink and ozone. When asked if he tried to stop them, the officer replied, They said the sound could live in text. 2. The deleted journal. One of the most mysterious losses of the period is the disappearance of the Journal of Neuroacoustic Studies, published in Moscow between 1971 to 1975. In 1977, all back issues were removed from libraries. The publisher's archive was found empty, shelves lined with dust outlines where boxes once stood. An internal memo from the Ministry of Health, found in microfilm copy, 1984. Ongoing containment requires not only removal of materials but erasure of associative memory in staff. Recommend reassignment of personnel to unrelated departments and use of chemical conditioning to suppress recall. Footnote added decades later by a Western analyst. This is the first known case of deliberate administrative amnesia. 3. Western counterpart. In 1978, the United States initiated Project Silence Protocol, officially described as post-acoustic signal suppression. In practice, it was identical: purge and forget. A Department of Defense field memo, partially released under FOIA, 2004. Following the Kuga station anomaly, all materials related to subsonic frequency manipulation must be withdrawn from active research. Researchers demonstrating persistent auditory recall are to be relieved of duty. In cases of irreversible contamination, recommend termination under medical pretext. One name is visible on the blacked-out page: Dr. Walter L. Keene. His obituary lists heart failure at age 41. But a later note in the same file states, subject reported hearing low-frequency vibrations in silence for 87 consecutive hours before collapse. 4. The hospital that never existed. In 1980, Soviet authorities established a special psychiatric ward at Novaya Berezovka, a remote settlement in the Ural foothills. Officially, it treated long-term auditory delusions. Unofficially, it housed the remaining survivors of the earlier programs. Declassified intake forms, 1987. Patient A031, female, 52. Former technician. Reports hearing snow breathe. States she dreams of a city where all clocks move without ticking. Patient C112, male, 47. Former Army communications officer. Complains of silence that presses. Attempts to bury ears under pillow to stop the hum. Patient D009, female, 34. Civil engineer. Draws concentric circles daily, unaware of repetition. Hospital burned down in 1983. Official cause, electrical fault. All patient records destroyed. 5. Field report, internal incident, Moscow, 1981. At 0400 hours, fire alarms triggered at Archive Building 12. Security cameras recorded bright flashes before system failure. Upon entry, responders found central storage room empty, all shelves bare, all papers missing. Only residue found, thin film of soot and fine metallic dust on floor. Radiation levels normal. Audio anomaly detected, faint humming audible even in playback silence. The event was classified as data compression error. No one mentioned it again. 6. Personal dossier, Major Nikolai Varnin. KGB, retired, debriefed 1990. We were told to close the past like a file. But you can't close something that's still breathing. I oversaw 6 disposal operations: microfilm, tapes, hard drives. Every time, I heard it, low, constant. Not in my ears, but in my bones. They said it was stress. But when I met the others, they heard it too. He pauses, shaking. We burned the last warehouse in '84. The air itself felt charged, like static in a cathedral. The sound changed pitch as the flames rose. We thought we had won. But then the city started showing up again. When pressed to elaborate, Varnon refused. He died 2 months later, leaving behind an unmarked tape labeled, "For those who still remember." 7. The Phantom Map. Between 1983 and 1985, several Western cartographers noticed an anomaly in Soviet satellite data, a persistent shadow, circular, faintly pulsing, appearing in remote Siberian coordinates where no town existed. Official geographic databases listed the area as uninhabited Zone 0. In 1986, French researcher Dr. Marcel Devereaux presented the finding at a private conference in Geneva. He displayed the satellite image, noting the shadow's rhythmic fluctuation at 7.1 Hz. Hours later, his slides disappeared. His audio recorder was found playing a low tone on loop. When asked by colleagues, he reportedly said only, "It was looking back." He left academia soon after. 8. The Final Erasement. By 1987, both superpowers had effectively purged the records. Entire departments disappeared from budget rosters. Classified buildings were repurposed, their foundations sealed with reinforced concrete. A final Soviet directive ordered no further mention of Settlement 37 in any official capacity. All remaining personnel to be relocated, retrained, or forgotten. It succeeded. For a time. 9. The Fall, 1989. When the Soviet Union began to collapse, forgotten archives resurfaced, crates of damaged papers, burned fragments, mislabeled reels. One such crate, recovered in 1991 by a journalist from Novosibirsk, bore a marking almost invisible under soot. S93/37. Inside, a single photograph. A snow-covered valley. In the center, faint outline of a tower's shadow, but no tower. The journalist's recorder picked up faint interference during the examination. The waveform analysis revealed a recurring signal at 7.1 Hz. He wrote one note in his logbook before disappearing in a winter storm. It's rebuilding. 10. Audio Appendix, found 1990, source unknown. Background, faint static, paper shuffling. Voice, they thought silence was safety. But silence is just memory, waiting for its cue. Tape distortion, low, rhythmic hum rises. Voice, if you listen closely, the city is still there. It never stopped breathing. End of tape. 11. Narrator's reflection, ending tone of segment 6. For decades, the world forgot. The buildings collapsed, the files burned, the people silenced. But some memories do not die, they wait. And sometimes, when the wind moves just right across the Siberian plain, the air begins to hum again. Segment 7, Reflection, 1990, present the silence that remains. Archival header, Federal Archive, Moscow, Catalog entry number 00093771. Recovered 1991 from collapsed ministry building. Contents: 1 damaged reel-to-reel tape, 3 waterlogged photographs, 1 burned envelope containing half a memo signed by M. Varnon. Condition: poor. Access restriction, lifted 2004. In handwriting below the printed text. Do not digitize. It changes when you record it. 1. The researcher. He found it by mistake. A young historian, Alexei Grigoriev, assigned to catalog post-Soviet debris, hundreds of crates, unmarked and mislabeled. Most were filled with useless bureaucratic junk, carbon copies, blank forms, receipts for furniture that no longer existed. But in one, the air felt different. He would later write, "When I opened the lid, the smell came first, not of mold, but of electricity. It was as though someone had bottled a thunderstorm. Inside was the tape, and a fragment of paper marked, 'Settlement 37, do not reconstruct.' He didn't know what it meant. Not yet. 2. The restoration. In 2003, Grigoriev partnered with an audio engineer to digitize the tape. They used standard archival protocols, isolated equipment, soundproof room, redundant recording. Still, the playback failed. Every attempt produced the same anomaly. A low, rhythmic pulse, 7.1 Hz, overlaying a faint human whisper. After 40 minutes, the waveform began to distort on its own. The engineer described the sensation as a room breathing. Grigoriev's last note in the session log: "The sound seems to change depending on who listens." 2 days later, he withdrew from the project, citing recurrent auditory interference. He began sleeping in his office, unable to stand silence. 3. The modern file. In 2005, a new digital file surfaced online, anonymous upload, no metadata, titled simply S37.wave. It was shared among fringe researchers, conspiracy forums, and sound engineers. Some claimed it was a hoax, an ambient art project. Others said it was real, that it caused headaches, insomnia, hallucinations. A physicist from Prague noted, "The waveform isn't random. It contains embedded patterns, binary intervals matching the coordinates of a Siberian valley." When investigators followed those coordinates in 2007, they found nothing but snow. And yet, radio equipment registered a faint electromagnetic pulse, cycling precisely at 7.1 Hz. 4. Field Report, 2008 Expedition. Location, Siberia, latitude, redacted. Observation, snow depth inconsistent. Certain sections compacted into near-geometric depressions. At night, measurable vibration in ground. Audio sensors recorded subsonic pulse between 3 to 8 Hz range. No wind present. One researcher reported dreamlike imagery. A city of light beneath the frost. The next morning, their GPS failed. The lead researcher's journal ends abruptly mid-sentence. "It's under the ice, and it's lease." No bodies were found. 5. Western declassification. In 2010, the CIA quietly released redacted portions of Project Silence Protocol. Among the pages, one memo stood out. "Do not engage with residual signals originating from decommissioned Soviet coordinates." Reports suggest the acoustic signature persists in environmental feedback. Possibly geological, possibly cognitive. Further investigation may cause reactivation. Below, handwritten in margin. Sound is memory. Memory seeks form. 6. The documentary that never aired. In 2015, an independent filmmaker, Jonas Hale, announced a documentary titled The City That Never Was. The trailer showed fragments of real footage, snow, ruins, and blurred human silhouettes at night. Within days, the trailer vanished. Hale's production company dissolved. A cached copy of his project notes reads, "The deeper I went, the less it felt like research. More like something wanted to be found, but not filmed." 7. Contemporary interviews. In 2019, a former Soviet communications officer agreed to speak under anonymity. He had served in the final years of the program, guarding the last transmission hub. "We were told it was just noise," he said. But the noise was organized, it spoke, in a way no human language could. Sometimes it would stop completely, and that was worse. Because silence meant it was listening back. When asked if he believed the signal still existed, he looked down. It never ended. The snow just got deeper. 8. Academic footnote. In 2021, a peer-reviewed paper briefly appeared in the Journal of Psychophysical Research. Resonant Cognitive Fields in Abandoned Infrastructures. It proposed that large-scale industrial ruins could retain emotional energy from human occupation, measurable as subsonic vibrations. One paragraph, later retracted, referenced unexplained acoustic residues in former Siberian settlements. Within 48 hours, the article was withdrawn. The official reason: editorial oversight. Unofficially, the servers crashed during peer review. 9. Letter from the researcher, found unsent, 2023. I've listened to the tape again. The hum is changing, slower now, almost tender. I think it's learning from me. Sometimes I dream of corridors, snowdrifts shaped like buildings. I hear voices under the ice, not crying, remembering. Maybe that's all history is. A sound waiting for someone to hear it again. The letter ends with a sketch, a circular map, intersecting lines converging on a blank center labeled simply City. 10. Epilogue, the narrator's reflection. When I first began this investigation, I believed the past was a closed archive, dusty, finished, filed away. But archives are not graves. They breathe, however faintly. Every burned paper leaves a scent. Every erased voice leaves a frequency. Settlement 37 may have never existed on any map. Yet somewhere beneath the frost, its heartbeat continues, slow, patient, impossible to silence. The hum is not a warning. It is a memory. And memory, once awakened, does not die. It waits for another listener. 11. Final footnote, added by editor, 2025. The authenticity of the recovered materials remains unverified. No physical evidence of Settlement 37 has been confirmed. Yet among those who have studied the case, there is one shared certainty. The sense that something, somewhere, has already begun to remember itself.